Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. I am really glad that you're here, and thank you so much for subscribing and sharing and showing up every week to listen to either the Midge's mumblings or our amazing guests that we have from time to time. And I am later this afternoon doing an interview for the Gay with God podcast with Bill Hulsman, an author, just a ritual designer, which I'll let him explain to you later, former educator, and I can't wait to bring him to you and have you listen and honor his story and hear about his debut book, 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Say the Mass. So I will be doing that interview later this evening, and then I will post it next Monday on Labor Day. So I'm really excited about that. And I've also had another conversation with a very cool person that I can't wait to bring that person to you, but it's not been confirmed yet. And I think that moving into the fall, we're definitely getting some energy back at the Gay with God podcast. And I really hope that you want to be a member of guests on this podcast and come into the house and let us honor your story, your faith journey, your coming out stories. It helps us remember that in community, we've all traveled a road that was extremely hard at times and almost overwhelming, and yet we've all come to the other side. And for those who are still on that path, and that path, even though we thought, well, it's all good now, everybody can come out and everybody can be open and it's all fine. Well, no, it's not. So right when we think we've got it all locked up and locked in, things happen. And so now coming out doesn't have the same freedom that it might have had a year ago or 2 years ago. It doesn't have the same safety around that. We're back in time to look at how scary it can be to have so much hate, vitriol hate, and crazy hate just unleashed. And it's overwhelming to see how far back we're starting to go. And I hope that sanity and just the soul love will come out of people instead of having it masked with all this hate. So today, what I'm talking about is the really good and evil. And before I get into that, I want to tell you that if you have not found Richard Rohr's podcast episode with Oprah Winfrey, you need to get Oprah Winfrey's podcast on your radar and find Richard Rohr's most recent guest appearance there. He's been on, I think this is his 3rd time, and well done for him, and well done to Oprah to continue to attract him back. But his most recent book, his 42nd and possibly his last book, he said, is The Tears of Things, Prophetic Wisdom for an Age of Outrage. This podcast, I will probably listen to this episode again. There was so many nuggets of wisdom in this podcast, and it is Richard Rohr's belief that what we're looking at now with all of the outrage and all of the backlash that we're seeing against people in our country is really us looking at our shadow sides and being able to look at who we really are and see that. So when we think about good and evil, and this is now Midge going on a tangent, so don't attribute this to Richard Rohr or Oprah or any of the great spiritual thinkers out there. But when we think of good and evil, I'm an Aries and I see things in black and white, which is not great. Okay, that would be one of maybe my shadow sides, is to see things in such black and white ways. And coming to the middle for me, as I continue to practice seeing the things in the middle, I'm usually, especially under stress, I will go right to the black and white of things, which I also find very offensive when we're talking about, being politically correct. And I hate to use the black is the evil and the light is the white, the white light or whatever, as good, because that really does diminish our brothers and sisters who are brown and black. So please forgive me, but I have to speak out of the only way I know right now. And so we look at the good and evil, assign whatever color you want to that, but it's going to offend somebody, I think, but I'm trying to do my best. So we look at the good and the evil of life, and we think that we can tell the difference, that this is clearly evil and this is clearly good. Well, that may be true through our lens. And then you may go to another country, you may go to another culture, and the good and evil to them has a whole different feel to it. And so we have to be really careful as we navigate in this world to think that we have all the answers, basically. Is that not what has always gotten our country into trouble? Is that we think the United States has always had all the answers. But historically, we have not had the answers. We have created all the problems. From the minute those ships landed on what we now call America, we already disenfranchised the citizens that were already there. By taking over the Native American lands, by torturing them, by creating an unsafe experience in their own homeland, we became the evil. And there's no other way for me to look at that, because there was the Trail of Tears and all of the deculturalization of the Native American community that was here before us. And you look at what we did to the black people that we brought over to this country. So when we think about good and evil, sometimes it seems so blatantly yes or no, right or wrong. And then it gets murky. So you have somebody that you truly, truly love, and they've been supportive of you, and everything is great until you realize that you're gay. And then you start to come out to people who have always supported you and loved you, and things start to fall apart. And they start to say vitriol things to you, and they start to disengage from you or excommunicate you from church or send you out of your own home, and you think those are evil people. That family, that friend, that church, they're all evil. And yet, before that, those people were people that you loved and that loved you, supported you. And those were people that prayed with you and sat with you and possibly prayed over a dying relative with you. And then you think, wow, how could they have changed so much? And yet they didn't change. They were just having a hard time figuring out how to bring their pre-recorded messages that they've always been taught in their head, that they've adopted into their soul, and bring it in to try to balance that love for you and their own fear of going to hell for siding with the sinner as they were taught and that we were taught. They sometimes fail to rise up to the level that we need them to rise up to. Does that make them evil or misinformed? Does that make them evil or scared? How many of us have said horrific things or planned horrific things out of fear? And anger sometimes covers up, for me, that deep seat fear. I can be rageful because of fear. I feel so inadequate to figure some things out. I feel so inadequate to do certain things. And out of that fear, I can get really, really angry because that anger forcing through me feels powerful, which covers up that very small, fragile child that's still in there, kind of calling the shots sometimes when I'm not paying attention. So good and evil today seems so clear. We look at this administration, this regime, all the people going along with it, all the people ignoring. And I also see that as just pure evil. I've said it, I've felt it, I believe it. And yet, some of those people, if they were not at the rallies, if they were not, in those garbs that they wear to prove their allegiance to this regime, they would probably most often be the one to help you change your tire on the side of the street. They would most probably be the person that would offer you a meal at their table. They would be the ones going to church every Sunday thinking they were doing it right. And who's to say who does it right? Worship in its own little box is like 1,000 boxes because everybody thinks they're doing it right. And yet the only right way to do any kind of spirituality is have it be so grounded in love that we're not divisive. And part of the Richard Rohr and Oprah Winfrey podcast that I just listened to was talking about being able to sit in a space of not good and evil, but of humanity. And being able to take a look at someone's beliefs and their thoughts and their rhetoric and try to find that place where we have commonality. Maybe we both love animals. Maybe we both love rainbows. Maybe we both love cotton candy or the pumpkin spice. And maybe we can't find commonality. But as we've talked on this podcast several times, is that until we are able to not see people as good and evil and see them as humans, that we are all supposed to be walking each other home, said Ram Dass. We're all walking each other home, but yet we can't do that if we're polarized and not able to see humanity. Now, you all know I'm not preaching to you because I'm sitting there right there with you thinking, oh, heck to the no. I will never agree with them. I will never approve them. We got to keep calling them out. And I'm not saying that we don't call out things that are wrong. But in our soul, where we resonate our love of God, where we are bringing our spirituality into the world, we need to be really careful and mindful of not demonizing people who are caught up in a belief system that's not our belief system. Now, apparently Richard Rohr has explored his shadows and worked through things, and he's now in his 80s. I think he's 83, perhaps, he said, and he is now in that place where he can look at what's going on in the world and not polarize it. Oprah's 71, and she has now come to the place where, of course, she took herself off of social media, so she doesn't have to be bombarded by it. So she has a little bit of a cushion, and she is able to look at somebody who's, completely different and say, well, that's their thing. That's just their thing. Now, that to me is a very minimization of what's going on. I can't just look at somebody who is, out there taking children away from their families and sending them to places that we don't know and say, well, that's just their thing. They like to deport children away from their families who are also legal immigrants. I can't do that. I just can't do that. However, I need to temper the rage, because the rage that I have with what's going on in the world can never be the thing that brings me peace of soul and helps me be a voice of change and love. It is always our goal to improve. It is always our goal to look at that shadow side of ourselves and figure out, how can I come a little bit closer to finding compassion for the people who are lost, for the people who are broken, without judgment, with observation, with understanding that I don't agree with what you're doing. I will never agree with what you're doing. But can I look past what the doing is and look at where that very scared and tortured child might be residing? And out of that need to belong, or that need to have someone take care of them, out of that need of fear, how can I see that piece of who you are? Because that's your humanity. Whatever's behind the bravado, the rage, the vitriol, disgusting choices, somewhere in there is the breath of God and a child that needs to be loved. So on the show page today, I have put a link to the podcast, and it may just go to Oprah Winfrey's podcast. I don't know if it's specific to the Richard Rohr episode, but it is the last one I think she did. So please get over to her podcast and listen to this really, really insightful and wonderful episode. And if you want to even go further into this, get Richard Rohr's new book, The Tears of Things, Prophetic Wisdom for an Age of Outrage. And for those of you who come every month to our Facebook group, Gay with God, where we do a Zoom monthly meeting called My Faith Journey, I think it would be absolutely wonderful if we chose this book for our fall discussions, and that each month we can look at a different chapter and be in community and talk about what Richard Rohr is gifting to us. So those of you who come every month, think about that. I think that might be a great idea. And then for those of you who aren't a part yet of the Gay with God Facebook group, please join us. I would love to have a really good conversation with all of you guys about the tears of things, because it's just a beautiful title. And the podcast episode with Oprah will tell you why he chose that title. And it's just also so beautiful. So please join us on the Facebook group Gay with God. Just go to Facebook, look for Gay with God, and then remember to answer all the questions so that I can invite you inside. Every single question, answer them all, and I would love to invite you inside. I would also like to invite you to have a complimentary session with me if you're wanting to deal with any kind of resilience issues, if you're having trouble coming out, if you've already come out but now you're scared to be out, if you're dealing with the fragility of our life right now and you would like to have a complimentary coaching session with me, I would love to have you on my list of people that I get to spend time with. Just go to the show page at Empowered, EMPOWERED, Midge, MIDGE, .podbean.com, and scroll down to the credits and you'll see where you can have a complimentary session with me. And I hope to see you on my list of people that I'm going to spend time with. You can also pick up a signed copy of my memoir, Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story, in that same list of social media connections where you can see where I hang out and things that I post. So I would love for you to have a signed copy of Gay with God, Reclaiming My Faith, Honoring My Story. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in a relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you. Even when you didn't know it, you have always been Gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger.
Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.